friends, family, students, neighbors, classmates, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here for our graduation ceremony. I would just like to take a moment to honor our graduate this year. This is the only chance I get to speak. So, Hadassah, I'd like to say I'm proud of you. Congratulations. It's beautiful to see what God is up to in your life, and I'm excited to see more. But to begin today, I would like to go through our bulletin a bit. We will sing a song together, and then it's our custom that the graduates and their fathers will speak. So right after our song, you will hear Hadassah speak and Laban speak, and then we will give our diploma, and then our commencement speaker will speak, and then Grandpa Kaufman will give the benediction. So that gives you a framework for where we're headed this evening. And again, invite you to participate by singing. You should have a song sheet, Be Thou My Vision. If you would find that and stand, we'll sing together. Be thou my vision. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart. Not be all else to me, save as thou art. Thou my best thought, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, be thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, I thy true Son. Thou in me dwelling,
Good evening. A lot has happened this year, so allow me to take a moment to refresh your memory. Did you know that this year, fires raged across the Australian outback, destroying many species of wildlife? Did you know that the dictator of North Korea went missing and then miraculously reappeared recently? I'm sure you've heard about the death of Kobe Bryant or the acquittal of President Trump, not to mention the worldwide pandemic and the George Floyd incident, which triggered protest across the nation. There are also extreme weather events such as earthquakes in Turkey and devastating floods in Indonesia. I guess if there was a very bottom of the list of everything that happened this year, it would be the 2020 graduation of an only senior at a private school in a town that's barely on the map. It can make a person feel very small. But when I think about everything that happened this year to make this happen, I don't feel small at all. I can't even imagine the countless hours of work that went into preparing school devotions, all the classes for different subjects, recess activities, report cards, hot lunch meals, field trips, and on and on. I remember the teacher who spent extra time trying to teach an uncoordinated 7th grader how to hit a ball when she failed over and over. It was a hopeless cause, but well meant. I recall the countless hours also of program practice that we all hated but desperately needed. And I remember Miss Byler coming to visit our play hospital when she had mountains of checking to do. And I'm overwhelmed by the many ways this community and school have loved and served all the students who have attended ZCS. I'm very grateful for everything I've learned at this school, even if I didn't appreciate it at the time. Algebra was a struggle for me, but towards the end, I actually started liking it. There was never much in chemistry that was easy for me, but with the help of my classmates, teacher, and a YouTuber named Tyler DeWitt, I came through the other side with my sanity intact. And now I'm glad I have a slight surface understanding of that field of science. In Proverbs, Solomon says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." I find this especially true in my life because I have a lot of plans. I recently realized that I can name 10 occupations or life paths that I would enjoy pursuing. Anything from raising dogs to being a philosopher. But the problem is I try to fit God into my plans, not base my plans off of his purpose for my life. Going forward, I'm terrified because I don't know what God wants me to do. But I know that to whom much is given, much is required. And I have been incredibly given to by the people in my life. One of my favorite verses is Ephesians 3:19, which says, "And to know the love of Christ, which passeth knowledge, that you might be filled with all the fullness of God." And I love to learn. I love to challenge new ideas and learn more about the world that we're living in. But in the pursuit of knowledge, I think it's important to remember that the love of Christ surpasses anything we can gain with knowledge. In closing, I would like to thank God, my family, and community for helping me build the foundation of my life so far. And good luck to the future graduates of this school. It's not as hard as they say it is.
Thank you, Hadassah. That was beautiful. Good evening to each one of you. So good to see you here. Thank you for coming. It's a small crowd here tonight, but as I think about the graduating class of 2020, many seniors didn't even get a small crowd like this. They had drive-by graduations or no graduations at all. So it's really an honor to have you here and participate with us. I tend to repeat myself a lot anymore, and about half of the time it's intentional. The other half is accidental. But I've said before, this is the fourth graduate that I now have. She's the fourth one. And I think I always say, you're not the only one that's having a senior moment tonight. As I think about Hadassah, there's just so much that goes into my mind. Tonight I asked her, are you nervous? Do you feel nervous about your speech? And she didn't seem to be, and so I said, it's probably going to be a small crowd, and she said, I'm glad. That's okay. And then a little later, she said something to the effect that, oh, it'd be really cool if this was my inaugural speech for the first female president of the United States. Hadassah always thinks outside the box. She comes up with stuff I didn't see coming at all. But that's her. You know, in some ways, it seems like just the other day that I was in the hospital room looking at your mom, and you're likely a very exhausted mom. And mom says, well, what shall we name her? And you would have thought we'd have had that figured out, you know, before she showed up. But honestly, we weren't sure what we were going to name her. We had some things in mind. And I said, well, how about Hadassah? And Julie was like, really? Are you serious? Because that's a name she had wanted for a long time, but it just hadn't grown on me yet. But I have come to just love your name, Hadassah. And what's more, ever since you were born, you just act like Hadassah. And so it's just the perfect name for you. And so Philippians 1 verse 3 says, I give thanks to my God for every remembrance of you. And honestly, Hadassah, it has been just a pleasure to have you as a part of our home. That verse, I think, says it so well, what I feel in my heart towards you tonight. You were our baby probably longer than any, you were longer than any of our other children, obviously excluding our youngest, Elijah now. And you became particularly precious to us after your mother miscarried, and we weren't sure if we were going to be able to have any more children. And so I think Hadassah probably spent more time in our bed than almost any of the other children. So she was very precious to us. You came to us as our mild and gentle one. That's been your personality and your spirit. And I feared early on in life that you were so mild and gentle that you would be taken advantage of. You were so vulnerable. And so I thank God for having preserved you as much as you have been to this point. And so God has truly created you with a truly beautiful spirit. God has also blessed you with a brilliant and creative and original mind. Some of the thoughts that you have are truly original. They're unexpected, and we saw that early on in your life. You tend to think about things that are far more mysterious and grand and majestic and deep and authentic than just your average ordinary things like getting up early and being on time, things like that. You're way, way above and beyond that. And I've told you for years already that you should be an author. I told you that a long time ago, and I still mean that, and I hope you take me serious. Maybe a writer of children's books or an illustrator, because you truly have an extraordinary mind, creative mind. More recently, you've displayed an unmistakable eye for beauty and creativity, and with your ability to put together some of the most amazing floral arrangements from stuff that you find around the house. I think that you even give, I noticed the other day, you even gave names to some of your floral arrangements, kind of like an artist would do for a painting or something like that. And I think there's probably few things that give you more pleasure right now than to just head out into the flower bed or the garden or the field or the woods and just create something out of whatever's there. You also have an exceptional ability to live in the moment. And it seems that some of us miss too much of life by trying to either hang on to the past or taking on the affairs of the future, but that is not you. You have just the unusual ability to live in the here and now. And it comes quite natural for you to abandon a task at hand or some assignment with a deadline. You can easily abandon that to join your siblings, especially your younger siblings, in some adventure that they have going on at the moment. And that's actually, for the most part, just such a beautiful thing. One memory in particular that I have of you thinking about living in the moment, and we were in Florida, and you were the oldest of the three that were with us, I think, as I recall. We were in an unfamiliar city. I was driving an unfamiliar car. We were in a traffic jam. I'm trying to listen to the GPS in rush hour traffic, and your little brother was screaming his head off. I mean, nonstop. I don't know what was up, Elijah. But you were sitting there next to him, he was in his car seat, and for the longest time, you sat beside him. You were just singing, quietly singing to him, not a care in the world, just totally oblivious to the racket and the noise around you. And I remember that, and your mom and I talking about that, and that picture stands out to me as kind of a picture of your heart. I said you came to us as a gentle and a mild child, but that doesn't mean that it's always been a gentle and a mild ride for the rest of us. A year or so ago, your mom and I became aware, belatedly, that we had failed to provide for you anything with a steering wheel. I don't recall buying anything, any toy or truck or car for the sandbox or the yard or anything like that. And even our mowers today have levers and hydrostatic drives. They don't have steering wheels and gas pedals and brake pedals. And so I can honestly, truly say it is always a blessing to see the little red Buick coming in the lane with you safely in it. It's just such a gift. As I already said, God has blessed you with a brilliant mind. In your lifetime, you have already devoured more books and literature than many people that are 3 and 4 times your age have. And in these books, you have explored the wonders and the mysteries of heaven and earth. Speaking of mysteries, I think if you could choose the ideal job, you said there was probably 10 you would choose from. I think close to the top of those would be to be a detective. There's few things that fire you up more than to solve a good mystery. And I remember you and your cousins from Pennsylvania, as I recall, you were sending letters back and forth to each other with cryptic messages or hints or clues on special paper. And so it's this thing of figuring out a mystery and a detective type of thing. And so this evening, I'm incredibly happy that you love to solve mysteries, because the life which lies ahead of you, without a doubt, holds many of them. I had to think of Isaiah 55, 8 and 9. It says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." You know, there will be times in your life where life will make very little sense to you. And there will be seasons in your life where it will feel like your world has been turned upside down. And verse 9 says, "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." So I can assure you that the path ahead of you holds a lot of mysteries, and that will require more wisdom and direction from the Lord than you ever imagined, to know and to understand what they are about. But Jeremiah 33:3 says this, "Call to me, and I will answer you, and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." So this evening, Hadassah, your future lies before you, really. And you've worked incredibly hard to get to this point. We have seen it. You've put a tremendous amount of hours in, and this is a very important milestone in your life. You have done well. I want you to know that. You've done incredibly well. And your grades are only one of those evidences that you've done well. And as you move into the future, I want to say, go for it. Live fully, even as you have now. Live in the moment with an eye to the future. Your mom and I are so proud of all that you have achieved as a student at ZCS. We're grateful to the teachers for all they gave, the input that they've put into your life. But more than anything else, our greatest joy comes from knowing that you have given your heart to Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And I believe it is your greatest desire in life to serve God by serving others. So may God bless you as you chase your dreams. As your dad, it's been and it continues to be my desire to give you both roots and wings, to equip you, to ground you, but also to give you the capacity to fly. Hadassah, I love you. Well done and congratulations.
It gives me great pleasure to invite you forward, Hadassah Kaufman. Congratulations.
Thank you.
There you go. Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you.
Very welcome. It's good to see you all here this evening. I'd like to make just a few remarks. We're here to celebrate achievement. One person's achievement mostly, but achievement by more. We're here to celebrate success and hard work. She's talked about it. All that hard work that she put in to get to the point where she is this evening. Congratulations and well done. A lot of late night studying. It took dedication to get to this point. You've done well. But I'd also like to recognize one other group, and forgive me, Hadassah, for taking a moment and enlarging the group. I see people here that are important to the school. There are people that have moved in to the community and are part of our school. There are students here that have children in school. And there is, if I'm not mistaken, there is only one situation of third generation students. And I think that's Dominic and Damien, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they are third generation students of this school. And that tells me that this endeavor has been worth it. That the vision of way back, Harvey, there's Mel, there's just many of those older men that had the vision to start this school and see where it is and what it has done today. It blesses me. Proverbs 22:6, written by a wise man, and Hadassah alluded to Solomon, said, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, she will not depart from it." The school backs up that teaching that is given in the home. As an extension of the church and of the home, it's been a blessing. And I suppose the reading, writing, and arithmetic falls under that same category. It shall not depart from you. There's, of course, one exception, algebra. I share your dislike of that. I resort to a calculator quite frequently. We are blessed to have a former teacher back, and I really don't need to introduce him, but I'm going to. We know him as Mr. Tim. I'm going to introduce Mr. Tim Kaufman. He is going to give us the commencement address. Mr. Tim.
Good evening. Hadassah, it's an honor to be here. And it was a privilege to be your teacher for 1 year. And it's a joy to see who you have become and to see who you are becoming. I look forward to seeing what you become in the future. We are here to recognize and to celebrate an accomplishment on Hadassah's part. But as I was thinking about that, I started asking myself the question, what exactly is his accomplishment? And we can say a lot of things about what Hadassah has completed. We can say that she has endured 11 or 12 years of schoolwork and doing what the teachers told her to do. That doesn't seem to quite get what we're celebrating. It doesn't seem quite worth celebrating. It's been mentioned that she made exceptional grades in most of her subjects, and that is something worth celebrating, but I'm not sure if it's quite worth this much. Some people might say, in completing your 12 years of school, you have completed your education, and that's what we're celebrating. But I think that's a problem. If any of you are familiar with the comic strip Strange Planet, you might have seen the comics where at a graduation, people are throwing their hats up in the air and saying, "My knowledge suffices." But anybody who has lived more than a few weeks after their graduation probably knows that at that point your knowledge doesn't quite suffice. Your education isn't complete, but you have still accomplished something worthwhile. But I think there are other ways to think about this. This is a transition point. We're marking a point of transition from one thing to another. But again, there's a question, what are the things? What's the thing you're transitioning from, and what's the thing you're transitioning to? We can say, in a way, you're transitioning from childhood to adulthood, or you're transitioning from school to real life. I hope not, because if that's how you think about this, I think there's probably a big problem with your school and your real life. We can say that this is a transition from a time when you were focused on accumulating knowledge and skills to a time of applying that knowledge and skills, or a transition from a time of preparation to a time of service. In any case, this time marks a point of transition from one stage of life to another. And as we think about transition, you've already mentioned that you're scared about the future because there's so many things you would like to do, and you don't know how your life is going to end up. And I think most of us feel that at times of transition. And sometimes in these times of transition, we look back on the things we just came from and struggle to connect what we just finished to what we're just starting. We can become cynical because the past sometimes doesn't seem to have anything to do with what we're going to do in the future or what's happening in the present. This is something right now that I'm dealing with. I'm having a graduation this week as well. And the last 2 years I've been studying at Faith Builders, and I was in the teacher training track. My intent going there was to get training to become a teacher. I devoted energy to that. And now I'm doing something different. I just moved back to Faith Builders this past week. I'm going to be managing the bookstore there and being the Dean of Men. And so I have a little bit of inkling, nagging question in my mind. What was this about? What do I do with the preparation I did to become a teacher if I'm not going to be a teacher? I think to make sense of things like this, to make sense of these transitions, we need to have a bigger purpose in life. To stay grounded and to live a fulfilled life, we have to have a larger purpose. The motive behind our education, what you just did, should be the same as the motive behind everything else you do in life. That motive might be, for some, to make a good living and take an early retirement, and then lounge around on the beach until you die of skin cancer. But I don't think that's your motive in life. But if that's not the motive, if your motive isn't just to live the American dream, if your motive isn't just to make money and have an easy life, what is the motive? What is the purpose that's going to ground your life? We often say that the purpose of our life is to glorify God. And this is a noble purpose. I'm not arguing with that. I'm not going to say anything against that. But I do want to take this in a different direction. What if I would tell you that the aim of your life should be to be glorified by God? Have you thought of that? I'll come back to that. I'm not going to explain that right away. But I do want to think about purpose in life and how in these times of transition we find grounding, we find meaning in a larger purpose, and I want to think about what that purpose is. We often get sidetracked into thinking about things we are doing, and we can spend a lot of time questioning, what should I do next? Which of these 10 occupations am I going to choose? What are you going to do with your life? Perhaps we need to change our focus a little bit and think about what we are becoming instead of what we are doing. And what you do is an important question. But I want to look at what we are becoming and think about why, step back from just the question of what am I going to do and think about why do I do what I do? Why am I going to do what I do? And how do I accomplish that purpose? And then get down to the nuts and bolts. That gives us a context to get down to the nuts and bolts of what I am going to do. We are called to be like Christ. This should be the answer if we ask the question, why do I do what I do? Or if we ask another question, why does God allow the things to happen to me that he allowed to happen to me? The answer should be that I do what I do, I choose the things I do. God allows things into my life to make me like Christ. Something we seldom hear, and I hesitate to say this, be like God. This sounds preposterous, except God says it. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, he said, "Be ye perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect." In 1 Peter, it says, "Be ye holy, as I am holy." We're called to be like God. And this gives meaning to life, to all of our life. This is a higher call than living a comfortable life with an easy retirement. This is a higher call even than making the world a better place. This may be a higher call even than spreading the gospel, because spreading the gospel finds its meaning, it finds its place in our emulation of Christ. As we strive to be like Christ and seek to become like him, we enter into the work he is doing in the world, and that means we do spread the gospel. But our focus and our passion should be to be like Christ, to join him in his work, to share his life. A few years ago, I started noticing how often the scriptures talk about, they use the word with when they talk about our relationship to Christ. He came to earth, he lived with us, he died for us, but you see often in the scriptures, especially in Ephesians, it uses the word with, and it talks about Christ being with us and us being with Christ. And so we share his life, and he lives through us as we become like him. So things fall into place for us as we become like Jesus. We'll still have decisions to make. We'll still wonder what the next step is at time, But if the overarching purpose of our life is to be like Jesus, that answers some of the questions we have about our lives, and it gives us, if we are settled in that our purpose is to be like Jesus, then the next question we need to ask is, how do I become like Jesus? And this moves us a little more toward practical application. How do I become like Jesus? What are the things I need to do? One answer from that is found in 2 Corinthians 3, verse 18, where it says, "We all, beholding as in a glass the glory of the Lord, are changed into the same image from glory to glory, even as by the Spirit of the Lord." So how do you become like Jesus? You do it by looking at Jesus and learning to see him. We do that through the work of the Holy Spirit, partly, but we have a part to play as well. And we can do that through a devotional life. But there are other ways, and this is where I want to make a connection to what happens in school. One thing I think I said a number of times when I was teaching is that the things we study so that we can learn to see God in those disciplines. And some things it's easier to see this than others. It's easier to see God's handiwork when we're studying science than it is when we're studying algebra, for most of us. But all of these things, whether you're studying science and studying the intricacies of butterflies or the grandeur of galaxies, or whether you're studying math and learning about the order God has built into the way things are, or if you're studying English and learning how to read, how to interpret what you read, that builds our understanding of Scripture. It makes us alive to the beauty of poetry and allows other people to speak to our lives. These things all open our eyes to see Christ. And Hadassah, it was mentioned that your dad mentioned that you have eyes to see beauty. And in seeing beauty, we should see Christ. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. And as we see Christ in the world, as we see Christ in works of art, things of beauty, as we see his hand in history, we should become like him. Those things should open our eyes so that we can become like him. We also see Christ through other people. Every person is made in the image of God. And I think as we learn, I think this is one of the most important ways we can grow in seeing Christ and become like Christ ourselves, is by opening ourselves to other people and learning to see Christ in others. Again, reflecting back on school, I think often the greatest impact of schooling is not from the curriculum, not from the things we study, the homework we do, but it's from teachers and from fellow students, from interactions with people. Those are the things that really shape us and that we usually remember. You probably won't remember in 5 years how to factor a polynomial unless you're a teacher and teaching that, but you probably will remember interactions you had with your other students and things that shaped you in that way. And I can attest to this from my own life. In the past 2 years, I did learn a lot of things. The classes I was taking impacted me, and I learned good things that shaped me in many ways. But I think the biggest lessons I learned and the most important things I learned were from things not related to class. Many of you know that during my first fall at Faith Builders, I caught my fingers in a table saw and nearly severed them. And I spent most of the next 5 months with my arm in a cast, and so I was not able to do many things for myself. I had to ask for help. I had to ask for help if I wanted to tie my shoes, if I wanted my shirt cuffs buttoned. And I had to learn to accept help from others. I learned a lot about grace through that. I learned to see God working in people and to see how he reaches into my life through other people. Because I knew this before. I knew that I can't deserve everything I get, but I wanted that. I wanted to earn things that I got. And suddenly I wasn't able to do things for other people, and I was having to ask them to do things for me. It was a humbling experience, but that was probably the most impactful experience on my life in these last 2 years, despite sitting in excellent classes and learning many, many good things. The biggest impact on my life came from other people. So again, we're thinking about how we become like Jesus, how we learn to see him. We need to recognize that God is with us. And as we interact with the world and relate to the world around us, we need to seek his heart in our responses to the things that happen to us and in our responses to the problems in the world. We need to learn to rejoice when God rejoices and to sorrow when he sorrows. And we become like Jesus simply by trusting him. Romans 8:28 is an often quoted verse. We know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. The next verse goes on to say, for those he did foreknow, them he did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son. We trust God to do good things in our life. That's what Romans 8:28 is about. And we trust him because we know that in those things he's doing, he is making us like himself. So we learn to see him, we become like him as we trust him and allow him to work. So we are always becoming something. We are always either becoming more like Christ or becoming less like Christ. So we talked about the motive. Our motive for everything we do should be to become like Christ. We've talked about how we become like Jesus. We look to him and we trust him. We learn to open our eyes to see him in the world, in other people, in the events that happen. And then there's still the question, what do I do? What job do I choose? Where am I going to go to church? Who am I going to marry? I can't offer you specific guidance for these things. There aren't formulas that will help you. But as you learn to see Jesus, and as you seek to be like him, you'll learn to recognize where Jesus is working. And then you can join him. This is one way to make decisions about our life, to decide, do I do this thing or this thing? Sometimes both things are equally valid. But as you learn to see Jesus, you'll learn to recognize his work, and then you can join him in what he's doing. And I think it's important to remember that Jesus spent 90% of his life doing normal things, probably more than 90%. We read mostly about 3 years of his life. The first 30 years, he was working in a carpenter shop. So the question, what do I do, doesn't always have to mean that you go do some great thing. It can mean doing the normal things. And in those normal things, God might prepare you for something greater. And now back to the statement I made at the beginning. Should the focus of our life be for us to be glorified by God? That sounds preposterous. It sounds ridiculous. Maybe at first hearing, it sounds like heresy. But becoming like Christ in this world, we seek to become like Christ was when he was here. But becoming like Christ ultimately means we become not just like he was, but like he is. And scriptures attest to this plenty of times. Any mention of us having crowns in heaven, or wearing white robes, or shining like the stars, this is about us being glorified as we become like Christ. 1 John 3, verse 2 says, "Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not appear what we shall be, but we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is." So there again, we have the thing of seeing Christ and becoming like him. But we also have the promise that we will become like he is now. The goal of our becoming like Christ, the goal of right now, we should strive to become like Christ was. Our goal in life, the things we choose to do, should be chosen based on what Christ did when he was here. But as we do that, by God's grace, we know that we will become like he is. So to sum this up, the key to a life of meaning and purpose is to focus our lives on becoming like Christ. This gives us a way to make sense of the past and the present and the future. It gives us a way in times of transition or times of uncertainty. It gives us something to ground our lives on. Seek to become like Christ. Make that the focus of your life, and God will honor you.
Thank you, Brother Tim and Brother Mark and Laban and Hadassah and Steve and all that had part tonight. I'm now seeing that we have a good supportive group here tonight. We want to support you, Hadassah, in prayer as you go forth in life. And we want to do what you referred to already in Ephesians 3:19, to know the love of Christ, which is greater than all the knowledge that you could ever get. Heart knowledge is so important. Let's close our eyes in prayer and be interceding for the challenges of life. Father, as we close our eyes at the terminating of this short time together, we say that we have been blessed just to take the initiative to come here and to pause about what has been happening all these years of our lives and what is happening today to the younger generation. We thank you so much, Father, for the courage that the young generation has. They have courage, and they are bold. Help them to continue to be that way, to serve the cause of Christ. We thank you especially for the thoughts of Brother Laban and Brother Tim. Help us to consider seriously the challenges that are before us. We know that the school is a challenge, the home is a challenge, the social life, the spiritual life, the work life, everything is a challenge. How to cope with the things that are happening in the world are also great challenges. We don't know what's going to happen, but we don't need to know, because we are serving an unchanging God. You are all-knowing, you are powerful, and you guide us through all our decisions. We pray that you would especially guide Hadassah. Help her to see, as her name means Esther, how Esther of old was called to the kingdom for a time when her own Jewish family was going to be murdered, and she was going to intercede for them. Help us all to understand that there is something we can do in times that there is great danger, and when we need much wisdom to know how to go ahead. We need much love. We need much patience. We need to have the gift of reasoning together. What shall we do? Not get excited, because that makes the crisis much worse. We do thank you for this evening and its blessing to us. Continue to open the way for us this night, tomorrow, and the days to come, as long as you extend our days on earth. Help us to see that we can best communicate with people when we are understood by them. We as educated people can be above them. We should not be that way. We should be service-oriented, like Jesus was. Jesus was the wisest man on earth. Help us to follow his pattern. We commit this evening unto you and all of our lives in Jesus, that we commit to Jesus Christ. In his name we pray with thanksgiving. Amen.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you, all of you. This brings our evening to a close. I have one quick announcement. Our school picnic, we've talked about a couple dates. I think we've settled on Thursday evening, July 5th. I'm sorry, 5 o'clock on July the 2nd. So July 2nd on Thursday is our next school event. I don't think so. No. Oh, okay. Thanks. All right. Thank you. Be blessed. You're dismissed. Oh, Mark.
On behalf of Mr. Tim, I'd like to mention to you that he's got a lot of responsibilities coming up in the future. He's going to be practicing social distancing, so I'd ask you to please respect that as you mingle afterward. He's being very cautious.